Hello everyone, welcome to the next session of this sound training seminar. I'm going to discuss with you today frequencies, what they are, how they influence our sound, where different instruments lie on the frequency spectrum. We're going to start with some of the basics. You may recall from previous sessions that frequency is one of the aspects of a sound wave. It is measured in this way. We see how many times the full waveform passes by a certain point in 1 second. And then we refer to that as hertz, meaning per second. How many oscillations per second take place. To illustrate, we have a mark. Let's say we have a waveform that is doing roughly that. We have another one that is of higher frequency. Okay, my drawings, I know, are very childlike. As you can imagine, if I pass by this, if this wave moves, we'll be able to measure the speed with which the oscillations pass a certain point. For this illustration, I'm not going to move this whole board. I'm actually just going to use my hand and move past. So the sound comes along, and as you can see, this one oscillates faster. There are more full waveforms that pass by my arm in 1 second when compared to the top one, which there will be less oscillations passing by the marked point in 1 second. Enough about that. Just to bring you back up to speed, we spoke about this in a previous session. Frequency measured in hertz. How many times per second? In other words, how many times in a second does the waveform pass a certain mark? It is written like that, hertz. We also speak of kilohertz, which is written like that. How many thousand times in a second does it pass by? I'm going to page over and draw a little graphic. Let's say this is the frequency spectrum. Over here we have 20 hertz. On this side we have 20,000 hertz. As you can see, I indicate that with the kilohertz being 1,000. I could have written 20,000 hertz. Okay, it's the same thing. Frequencies down here at this end are obviously much slower. They only pass by a specific point 20 times a second. So that wavelength is obviously longer and it passes by slower. 20,000 means it's going like crazy, as you could imagine. This is going to be a higher sound, this is going to be a lower sound, referring to a previous session where we said the longer the wavelength, thus the slower the frequency, the lower the sound. Bearing in mind, wavelength and frequency are inversely connected. The higher the frequency, the faster it moves. Shorter the wavelength, the higher the sound. I'm going to give you an example of some sounds at different frequencies. Just out of interest's sake, let me mark 1 kilohertz right over there. Just marking it there arbitrarily. This is not to scale, obviously. I'm going to give you a sound at 440 cycles. I use the term cycles just to acquaint you with some of the terminology that is used in the engineering world. The term cycles refers to how many oscillations. I could have used the word oscillations. I could have used the word hertz. Hertz, cycles, oscillations are used as synonyms. Here comes a sound at 440 hertz. This is what it sounds like. let me just mark this one first. Let's say it's roughly here. Now a sound at 880. Compare the two sounds briefly. 880 sounds higher than 440, and that correlates with the principle that we've been discussing, namely a shorter wavelength, a higher frequency, a higher sound. A longer wavelength, a lower frequency, a lower sound. Let's do 220. And this is what 220 sounds like. So we have 220, 440, 880. Let's just compare the three again. I'm using a simple piano tone at those different frequencies. Here we go. 220, 440, and 880. Just out of interest's sake, the reason why I selected those frequencies is not arbitrary. A symphony orchestra normally tunes on A, the note A. The A that is played from the piano, from which all the instruments tune, is the A that lies at 440 hertz. So this is an A, this is also, and this is also. Don't worry why, we'll discuss more about that at a later point in time. For now, to understand that this is where the frequencies lie, this is just a graphical representation of where frequencies lie, and the higher they go, the higher they sound. I'm just going to play, let's say 880 times 2 is 1760 if you double that. And it sounds like this. You'll notice that I've doubled the frequency every time, or halved it every time that I've used this example. Again, that is not arbitrary. It was not just some frequency that I selected. I specifically selected 440, as it is the middle A that is normally used to tune a symphony orchestra to. And then I went to 880, which is double the frequency. And I went to 220, which is half the frequency. And you should probably have heard, if you have any musical talent within you, you should have heard that those three notes do have some form of an attachment to each other, a similarity. And if you heard that, you would be correct. They are octaves. They are each one octave removed from the other. Therefore, this is an A, this is an A that is an octave higher, this is an A that is another octave higher, and there is an A that is another octave higher. Unfortunately, we cannot delve too deeply into music and musical tones and musical notes in this course, as it is mainly a sound engineer training seminar. So we're not going to spend too much time on music and musicality, but I need to mention some of these because they do play a role when it comes to doing the sound. And it would be very good for you to consider another training course that I'm presenting here on YouTube. Look for it on my channel, The Theory of Music. It would be ideal if you as an engineer understand some of the basics of the theory of music.